All right, rock and roll. Welcome one, welcome all to the Scorched Earth Political Podcast. I am your host, John, and if you could kindly hit that like and subscribe button, it means a lot to us, and feel free to drop something in the comments, whether it's something I say. If you want to be right, you can agree with me. If you don't agree with me, feel free to leave a comment. I will say that I've gotten some very thoughtful, intelligent comments that disagree with my positions, and it's amazing that when we really dig down in the weeds, there's not as much separating us, I think, as possible. I do believe this instinctively and intuitively, that the powers that be want us to fight among ourselves. They want us to hate each other so we cannot look at what they are doing and hold them accountable for their egregious behavior. Because believe me, they are only about enriching themselves. They are not about helping the American people. But let's get to it. Let's burn it all to the effing ground. And it's Tuesday and of Thanksgiving week. And the biggest story is it does seem like there is some momentum being made in the Ukrainian-Russian peace deal. It seems to me that these are like two guys in the marathon who are literally on their last reserves. I saw a report today, I think it was out of Politico, that when President Trump went from Washington to Alaska, the CIA chief briefed him and said, the Russians are on their last gasp. They can't get any new soldiers. They can't even pay the soldiers they have. The soldiers are deserting. And he didn't use that leverage at all. I mean, we all saw what happened. He rolled out the red carpet. He capitulated. He kissed the ring, whatever it is. Zelensky, they are getting bombed each and every night. And it is horrific. And honestly, if we gave them $50 billion, $100 billion more, they would win this war in 6 months. You know, if you remember back to when this war started, everybody thought Kyiv would fall in 3 days or a week or whatever. And it is because of the brilliant presidency that is Vladimir Zelensky that they have been able to hold the line. And yeah, Russia's made some forward advances. They've seized land, especially in the eastern region in Donbass, but they're doing an amazing job. And there was a report out earlier last week that said in the 3 years that Russia has laid siege to Donbass, they only have about 65% of it. To get the other 35% at the rate they're going will take another 3 to 4 years. So it obviously tells you that the Ukrainians are a formidable foe. And honestly, they have really changed the axis of war. Before, war was planes, boats, jeeps. Now it is about drones. And actually, our Army Secretary, Dan Driscoll, has been over, and he said this on X 3 weeks ago, that literally he wanted to go over there and learn how to use drones in the theater of war, because Ukraine has done that so adeptly and so brilliantly. They are literally the leaders. Now, of course, their defense budget is 1/20th of what ours is. We have a $1 trillion budget, and really what it is, it's feeding the military industrial complex. Yeah, get another $50 million plane. Let's get a $2 billion stealth bomber. Drones are the future. And this administration, this military doesn't want to accept it, but I'm getting way off track here. But what I want to talk about is we are going towards this place. And I don't know where Zelensky goes here. I think he has handled himself admirably. I think Putin, I really think you have two polar opposites. Zelensky has been about his people. Putin has been only about his own narcissism. And in that way, he's very much like Donald Trump. Maybe that's why they get along so well. And maybe because he has a blackmail P video of the president. But there's three main sticking points. You know, they came up with this 28-point plan. Like, wow. Are you some kid in kindergarten? Let's just figure it out, right? But there's three main sticking points. And number one is Ukraine joining NATO. Now, there's some things I found out in doing research that the NATO thing is probably not going to happen, unfortunately. I wish Joe Biden would have brought him in, but he was too worried about escalating the war. I can understand that trepidation. But one of the generals in Europe said, well, they can join the European Union and start the process to getting into NATO. Okay, so we're probably going to have to take a pass on that. That's not going to happen, especially with Trump. But, you know, Trump wants to leave NATO. Why should he care if they want to join? Maybe they can just take our slot. Hey, how you doing? Also, another sticking point, and this is really an essential one, is that security forces need to be on the ground in Ukraine to ensure their safety. And the fear is that Russia is going to get a ceasefire, they're going to regroup, and in a year or two, they're going to launch again on the Ukrainian people to get what they didn't get the first time around. If there's no security forces there, then it's going to be a serious problem. We need forces from Europe and probably the US. You know, Donald Trump says he doesn't like war, but he sure likes the acts of war. You know, Venezuela, the Iran bombing. Yeah, right. Real peace lover there, huh? And also, and this is going to be the sticky wicket, is allowing Russia to keep land that they are occupying currently. Now, there's two different things that are going on here. They have basically ensconced themselves in the Donbass region, which is the former industrial area on the eastern area of Ukraine, basically where base of their munitions and their industrial base came out of. And the UK and France today came out and said, no, they cannot illegally gain land. So it should be a really interesting thing. But the other thing that really struck me is, if you remember, if we go back in the time capsule to 2014, Russia illegally annexed, invaded, whatever term you want to use, Crimea, which was part of Ukraine. And they still occupy that. They want that to be officially recognized as Russian territory. And I personally do not see how that can happen. We cannot let that stand. You know, one of the things that theoretically democracies do is we don't invade people. Of course, George Bush and Dick Cheney, you know, would differ. But typically, as democracies, we aid other countries. We do not invade them. We do not annex them. We do not subjugate them. Russia does that. China does that. North Korea, if they had the power, they would do that. Israel does it too. So maybe my democracy theory is a little askew. But we shall see what happens. Donald Trump, on Tuesday of Thanksgiving week, sent his little strip mall contractor, Steve Witkoff, over to Moscow to continue negotiating. Army Secretary Dan Driscoll was sent over to Ukraine to kind of figure out what's going on. It seems like we're on the precipice of a deal. I think the deal could have got done a lot quicker if we would have said, if you don't agree to a ceasefire and leave Ukraine, we are going to allow Ukraine to come into NATO within 30 days. Or, like I have been advocating, give them $100 billion, $200 billion defense package. That is, and give them long-range missiles, because Ukraine has been causing amazing damage to the infrastructure in Russia and their energy systems. You know, it's funny, Donald Trump says Ukraine has to agree by Thursday. How many passes has he given Russia in literally his 10 months in office? And God, what a long 10 months this has been. I mean, really, he keeps giving them a pass, and then a delay, and then another delay, and then another delay. You know, I read today that supposed thing a month ago that he was going to sanction the two major oil companies in Russia really hadn't happened yet. Wow. What a surprise. Taco Trump. He's taco on the tariffs. He's taco on diplomacy. All right, let's get to it. I'm going to get to a story that really, I don't know, it just, especially as we come into Thanksgiving week, which is, to me, the beautiful thing about Thanksgiving is the nexus, the origins of it is us as Europeans traveled across the Atlantic, came to America, and joined with the indigenous people, which were the Indians, and formed a community. Stark irony to what the Trump administration is doing in this current administration, and how they are repelling and vilifying and subjugating people who want to come here and have a better life. This is a country made of migrants. And that's what makes America so beautiful. And it also is what makes us so prosperous, because we have so many people who come here and think, I have a chance, and they continue to just grind and grind and grind. But this, I don't even, so let's go back in the time capsule to 2017. Donald Trump came in, wanted to build the wall, wanted to control immigration, and he instituted his infamous kids in cages policy. And basically what he did in 2017 was, if they now remember, they didn't have as aggressive enforcement of ICE back then as they do now. Yeah, they ramped it up, make no mistake about it. But when they would pick up a family, what they would do is immediately, as a leverage point, they would separate the kid from the mom and dad. And then they would put the kid in a cage in a detention facility, right? They caught so much flack. And I don't know if you remember, but Melania got on Air Force One and she had a jacket and it says, I don't care, which in the heart of the kids in cages scandal, let's call it the scandal, was incredibly tone deaf. But you know, that's the Trump administration. Quickly, there was so much backlash, they had to end the policy in 2017. Didn't even last 7 months. Well, let's come around. Trump 2.0, okay? Lame duck Trump. Well, he won the election in part because of his incredibly vitriolic rhetoric about anti-immigration. So now what they do is they detain somebody, right? And if you're in a family, what they do is they get you, they separate the mom, they separate the dad, and then they take the kid and they send them to a detention facility where they kind of just get lost in the system. If this sounds familiar, I did a story last week about in the Chicago immigration raids, the first batch was over 600 people. Of course, only 16 had any prior criminal histories. So it wasn't about crime, it was just about picking up the brown guy. And they shipped them out to Alabama, Texas, and I believe Kentucky was the other one. I could be wrong on that. But what they're doing is they get them in there and they put them in the system and they send them as far away as possible to literally destroy their lives. This isn't about immigration, it's about intimidation and degradation. It is disgusting and it is so below what America should be. But let's talk about the kids. So now this year, this policy started that ICE is going to pick people up and then they're going to separate the whole family and they're going to send the kids to detention centers and lose them in the system where the parents cannot find them. It is incredibly difficult to get somebody. I mean, think about it. How many people got sent to San Salvador and their families didn't even know where they are? I have read numerous reports where families have got lawyers and tried for 2, 3, 4 months to find out where their loved ones are, and they get nothing. No response. And understand this, the government, if they want to be obstinate, can be obstinate. Have you ever tried to call an agency or something like that and you're not getting through, you're not getting answers? That is what the immigration with ICE has become today. They literally want to make it as difficult as possible. So the Washington Post uncovered a document late last week, that showed what happens is they scoop up a family. Now, the family had a child in America. So that kid is a US citizen. So they get the family in a room and they say, here's the deal. We are either you can either self-deport within 72 hours, or you're all going to detention centers far apart from each other. And with the child who is a US citizen, if a relative, friend, or whatever wants to sponsor them in the United States, and they are going to use a microscope to look at the legal status, which in the Trump administration changes minute by minute, of that person who's going to sponsor. So think about the intimidation factor that's going on there. It's insane. And if that person has any legal hiccups, that they are going to be criminally charged by the Trump administration for trying to sponsor that American citizen. I think it's illegal abetting of activity in the United States, something like that. Like, wow, how heinous. They are doing everything they can to put a chill in America. And I will tell you this, we see the economic numbers going down, and obviously it's because, in a huge part, because of Donald Trump's failed economic tariff policy, but also we are taking a large swath of productive people in our economy and throwing them over the side of the boat. You know, these immigrants come here because they want a better life. They are not taking some American's job. They're just not. And, you know, it's kind of like the folly of, we're going to bring back the industrial base. Obviously, Donald Trump, the billionaire, doesn't really understand. I grew up in a blue class world. I was in construction, industrial world. There is nobody who wants their kid to follow in those footsteps. They want them to get a white collar job. They want them to move up. Really, is there anybody out there who thinks that Americans are going to say, yeah, my son or daughter, I can't wait till they can go work in the fields and pick strawberries? I mean, really? If you believe that, you are on some psychedelics that even Aaron Rodgers of the Pittsburgh Steelers would envy. Like, wow, ayahuasca ain't even there. You have way past that. It's disgusting and it's deplorable, and it's what they do. Also, they have detained over 600 kids since April of this year. 600. To give you a framework of how many kids that is, in the entire 4 years of the Biden administration, they didn't even get to 500. 600 is the largest number in the last 10 years being detained in U.S. shelters by immigration in America. If you remember, last 10 years, that was 4 years of the first Trump go-around. They are really ratcheting it up. And also something to finish up the podcast today, Florida is literally the biggest driver in the immigration crackdown. They have over 5,000 officers and law enforcement that they have engaged in the crackdown on what they consider illegal immigrants. The Florida Highway Patrol is the biggest scooper of people. But something that was really insane is they have enlisted, Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump have enlisted the Fish and Game Department to start picking up people that they think are illegal immigrants. They have deputized them to be able to arrest them and start the process of deportation. Fish and Game. I don't know if you could see some ducks in the background. You know, Fish and Game is there to make sure our waterways are safe, that our fish, that our animals are treated well. They are not here to scoop up people who are just trying to have a better life. But that's all this administration's about. Yeah, maybe those ducks there got the deportation thing. Oh, we better self-deport back to Canada. Winter. I guess they would go to Mexico probably, right? All right. If you could, be kind enough. Hit that like and subscribe button. Feel free to drop a comment. And happy Thanksgiving. All right. We'll see you soon on the Scorched Earth Political Podcast.